The crisp autumn air bit at my cheeks as I stood frozen on my parents' porch, my hand hovering inches from the doorbell. I'd made this trip countless times before, but tonight was different. Tonight, I was about to shatter the facade of family, harmony we'd carefully maintained for years. My name is Kendra, and I was about to confront my brother for stealing my inheritance. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the storm that was about to break. The weight of the manila envelope in my hand felt like an anchor, threatening to drag me down into the depths of despair. Inside were the documents that proved Ross's betrayal, bank statements, legal papers, and a trail of lies that led straight to my brother's door. With trembling fingers, I pressed the doorbell. The cheerful chime that echoed through the house seemed to mock the turmoil churning inside me. I heard footsteps approaching, and for a split second, I considered turning and running. But I stood my ground. I owed it to myself, to the little girl who once believed in the sanctity of family, to see this through. The door swung open, revealing my mother's smiling face. "Kendra, sweetheart, you're early. Come in, come in." She pulled me into a hug, and I fought the urge to break down right there in her arms. If only she knew the truth that was about to explode our world. I followed her into the house, the scent of roasting chicken and herbs filling the air. It was supposed to be a normal family dinner, a celebration of Ross's latest business success. Little did they know that his success was built on the ashes of my future. As we entered the dining room, I saw Ross lounging in his chair, a glass of wine in hand and a smug smile on his face. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something, fear perhaps, cross his features. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by his usual charm. "Hey, sis," he said, raising his glass in a mock toast. "Glad you could make it?" I felt bile rise in my throat. How could he sit there, so casual, so unaffected, when he had systematically dismantled my life? I clutched the envelope tighter, my knuckles turning white with the effort of restraining myself. My father emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Kendra, perfect timing. Dinner's almost ready." He gave me a quick hug, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. I couldn't take it anymore. The lies, the pretense, it was suffocating me. "Before we eat," I said, my voice sounding strangely calm to my own ears, "there's something we need to discuss." My mother's brow furrowed with concern. "Is everything all right, dear?" I looked directly at Ross, who had the audacity to appear puzzled. "Why don't you tell them, Ross? Or should I?" The room fell silent, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, counting down the moments until our family imploded. Ross set down his wine glass, his facade of innocence slipping. "Kendra, I don't know what you're talking about, but maybe we should discuss this in private." "No," I said firmly, surprising myself with my resolve. No more secrets, no more lies. I turned to my parents, whose expressions had shifted from confusion to worry. "Mom, Dad, Ross has been manipulating you. He's stolen my inheritance." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's face darkened, his eyes darting between Ross and me. "That's ridiculous," Ross scoffed, but there was an edge of panic in his voice. "Kendra, you're not thinking straight. Maybe you've been working too hard." I slammed the envelope down on the table, cutting him off. "It's all here. The forged documents, the transfers, everything. You convinced them to sign over my share of the inheritance to you, didn't you? Played on their fears about my instability after my divorce, made them think you could manage the money better." My father reached for the envelope with shaking hands. "Ross, is this true?" For a moment, Ross's mask slipped completely, revealing the cold, calculating person beneath. Then, like a switch had been flipped, he was all concern and confusion again. "Dad, you can't believe this. Kendra's clearly upset about something, but these accusations are insane." I felt a surge of white-hot anger. "Insane? You want to talk about insane, Ross? How about systematically gaslighting your own sister? Making our parents think I was too fragile to handle my own finances while you bled my accounts dry? My mother had sunk into a chair, her face ashen. I don't understand. We were trying to protect you, Kendra. The pain in her voice was like a knife to my heart. By taking away my independence? By letting Ross control everything? My father had been silently reviewing the documents, his expression growing grimmer with each page. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with a mixture of anger and deep, crushing disappointment. "Ross," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "explain this." For the first time, I saw real fear in my brother's eyes. The game was up, and he knew it. But even cornered, Ross was a master manipulator. He stood slowly, spreading his hands, in a gesture of openness. "Okay, let's all calm down. There's been a misunderstanding, that's all. I was trying to protect Kendra's interests, to grow her inheritance." "By funneling it into your own accounts?" I interjected, my voice shaking with rage. "By using it to fund your business ventures that always seem to fall through?" Ross's composure cracked. "You don't understand the pressures I'm under," he shouted. "I had debts, people breathing down my neck. I was going to pay it all back, with interest." The room fell silent again, the weight of his admission settling over us like a shroud. I looked at my parents, seeing the shock and betrayal written across their faces. This was the moment I had been pushing for, the revelation of truth I thought would bring me satisfaction. Instead, I felt hollow. My father stood up slowly, his movements deliberate, as if he had aged decades in the span of minutes. "Ross," he said, his voice heavy with authority, "you will return every cent of your sister's inheritance, and then you will leave this house." Ross's face drained of color. "Dad, you can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not our concern anymore," my mother said softly, and the finality in her tone was more damning than any shouted accusation. I should have felt triumphant. This was justice, wasn't it? The truth had come to light, and Ross would face the consequences of his actions. But as I watched my brother's world crumble around him, I felt no joy, only a deep, aching sadness for what our family had become. Ross turned to me, his eyes pleading. "Kendra, please, you don't want to do this. We're family." I met his gaze, searching for any trace of the brother I once knew, the one who had protected me from schoolyard bullies and taught me to ride a bike. But that brother was gone, consumed by greed and selfishness. "We were family, Ross," I said quietly. "You destroyed that the moment you decided to betray me." With those words, something final snapped between us. Ross's face hardened, all pretense of remorse vanishing. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door, pausing only to spit out, "You'll regret this, Kendra. All of you will." The slam of the front door echoed through the house, followed by the roar of his car engine as he peeled out of the driveway. And just like that, he was gone. I stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of our family dinner, the aroma of the now-forgotten meal mingling with the acrid taste of betrayal in the air. My mother was weeping softly, my father holding her, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I wasn't sure what exactly I was apologizing for bringing this pain into their lives, for not realizing sooner what Ross had become. My father looked at me, his expression a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "No, Kendra, we're the ones who should be sorry. We should have seen through his lies, should have protected you. I wanted to tell them it wasn't their fault, that Ross had fooled us all. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. As we sat there in the wreckage of our family dinner, I realized that this was only the beginning. Exposing Ross's betrayal was just The first step on a long, painful journey of healing and rebuilding trust. And as I looked at my parents, their world shattered by the actions of their son, I knew that journey would be harder than anything I had faced before. The days that followed the confrontation with Ross blurred together in a haze of legal meetings, tearful conversations, and sleepless nights. I threw myself into the process of reclaiming my inheritance, working with lawyers to untangle the web of deceit my brother had woven. But even as I fought to regain what was rightfully mine, I couldn't shake the feeling of loss that clung to me like a second skin. It wasn't just about the money. Ross had stolen more than my financial security. He had shattered my trust in family, in the very foundation of what I believed kept us safe in this world. Every memory I had of my brother was now tainted, viewed through the lens of his betrayal. Had he always been like this, I wondered? Or had something fundamental changed in him over the years? A week after that fateful dinner, I found myself sitting in my apartment, surrounded by stacks of financial documents and legal papers. The lawyers had assured me that we had a strong case, that Ross would be forced to return every penny he had taken. But as I stared at the cold, impersonal numbers on the pages before me, I felt no sense of victory. My eyes drifted to a small jewelry box on my bookshelf. Inside was my grandmother's bracelet, a delicate silver chain with a single charm, a heart-shaped locket that held a tiny picture of our family, taken years ago when we were still whole. Grandma had given it to me on her deathbed, telling me it was a symbol of the love that bound our family together. With trembling hands, I took out the bracelet, the silver cool against my skin. I opened the locket, looking at the smiling faces, captured within. Ross's arm was around my shoulders, both of us beaming at the camera, unaware of the future that awaited us. A sob rose in my throat, and for the first time since the confrontation, I allowed myself to truly break down. I cried for the little girl in the photo who idolized her big brother, for the years of memories now poisoned by doubt, for the family that would never be the same again. As my tears subsided, I found myself filled with a strange sense of clarity. The bracelet in my hand suddenly felt heavy, burdened with the weight of shattered illusions. In that moment, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. I was going to sell the bracelet. The thought sent a shiver through me. This was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a tangible link to my past, to the family I had lost. But as I looked at it now, all I could see was a reminder of betrayal and broken trust. With a determination I didn't know I possessed, I reached for my laptop and began researching high-end jewelry auctions. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. The bracelet was valuable, both in terms of its craftsmanship and its provenance. I would make sure it fetched a price worthy of its significance. As I typed, a new idea began to take shape in my mind. The money from the sale of the bracelet, combined with whatever I managed to recover from Ross, could be the seed of something new. Something that could perhaps begin to heal the wound his betrayal had left in my heart. I opened a new document and began to type furiously, my fingers flying over the keys as if possessed. Hours passed, the sky outside my window transitioning from the soft light of dawn to the golden hues of afternoon. When I finally sat back, my eyes burning from staring at the screen, I had the rough outline of a plan. I was going to start a nonprofit organization, one dedicated to helping women recover from financial abuse and betrayal, to reclaiming their independence and rebuilding their lives. I would call it Worth Rising, a name that spoke to the phoenix-like rebirth I hoped to facilitate for others, and perhaps, in the process, for myself. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ross's betrayal, meant to diminish me, to render me powerless, was instead becoming the catalyst for something greater than I had ever imagined for myself. In trying to destroy me, he had inadvertently set me on a path to empowerment. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across my living room, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. It was fragile, tentative, like the first green shoot pushing through soil after a long winter. But it was there. I picked up the bracelet once more, running my thumb over the smooth surface of the locket. "I'm sorry, Grandma," I whispered. "But I think this is what you would have wanted. For your legacy to help others, to create something meaningful." With a deep breath, I closed the locket and placed the bracelet back in its box. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of selling it. Tomorrow, I would take the first steps towards creating Worth Rising. Tomorrow, I would start to reclaim my life. As I prepared for bed that night, exhausted but filled with a newfound sense of purpose, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked different somehow. Older, perhaps, with shadows under her eyes that spoke of recent pain. But there was also a strength in her gaze that I didn't recognize, a determination that hadn't been there before. For the first time since discovering Ross's betrayal, I allowed myself a small smile. The road ahead would be difficult, I knew. Rebuilding my life, creating this organization, learning to trust again. None of it would be easy. But as I turned off the light and slipped into bed, I felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the darkness of my bedroom, I made a silent promise to myself and to all the women I hoped to help. This was not the end of my story. It was only the beginning. The next few months passed in a whirlwind of activity as I threw myself into bringing Worth Rising to life. The sale of my grandmother's bracelet had fetched a higher price than I'd anticipated, providing a solid foundation for the organization. Combined with the funds I'd managed to recover from Ross, though a significant portion remained tied up in ongoing legal battles, I had enough to get started. My days became a blur of meetings with lawyers, nonprofit consultants, and potential board members. Nights were spent hunched over my laptop, researching similar organizations, drafting mission statements, and outlining programs. I was running on caffeine and determination, barely stopping to eat or sleep. But despite the exhaustion, I felt more alive than I had in years. Every small victory, securing office space, filing for 501c3 status, bringing on our first volunteer, filled me with a sense of purpose that overshadowed the lingering pain of Ross's betrayal. It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. There were moments of doubt, nights when I lay awake wondering if I was in over my head. The legal battles with Ross dragged on, each new development reopening old wounds. And then there were my parents, struggling to come to terms with what had happened, their relationship with me strained by guilt and unspoken resentments. But through it all, Worth Rising grew. We started small, offering financial literacy workshops and one-on-one counseling sessions. As word spread, more women began to reach out, sharing their own stories of financial abuse and betrayal. Each tale strengthened my resolve, reminding me why I had started this journey in the first place. 6 months after that fateful family dinner, I stood in the newly painted office of Worth Rising, preparing to welcome our first official client. The space was small but bright, with motivational posters adorning the walls and a small library of financial resources in the corner. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As I straightened a stack of brochures on my desk, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my mother. "Thinking of you today. So proud of what you're doing. Love you." I felt a lump form in my throat. Our relationship was still healing, the trust slowly being rebuilt. But messages like these gave me hope that one day we might be whole again. The door chimed, and I looked up to see a woman enter, her eyes darting nervously around the room. She was probably in her mid-30s, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and worry. "Hi," I said, forcing a warm smile onto my face despite the butterflies in my stomach. "I'm Kendra. Welcome to Worth Rising." The woman gave me a timid smile in return. "I'm Sarah," she said softly. I I'm not sure if I'm in the right place. A friend told me about you, said you might be able to help. I gestured for her to take a seat, my heart aching at the familiar look of desperation in her eyes. Why don't you tell me what brings you here, Sarah? As Sarah began to speak, her story, unfolding in halting words and barely suppressed tears, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. The details were different, but the core of her tale, betrayal, manipulation, financial abuse, echoed my own experiences. I listened intently, offering tissues and gentle encouragement when Sarah's words faltered. By the time she finished, an hour had passed, though it felt like mere minutes. Thank you for sharing that with me, Sarah, I said, leaning forward slightly. I want you to know that you're not alone. What happened to you is not your fault, and there is a way forward. Sarah looked at me, a glimmer of hope breaking through the pain in her eyes. How can you be so sure? I took a deep breath, weighing my words carefully. Because I've been where you are. My own brother stole my inheritance, manipulated my family, against me. It nearly broke me. I paused, meeting her gaze steadily. But I'm here now, and I'm going to do everything I can to help you reclaim your life and your worth. As I outlined the steps we would take together, legal counsel, financial, planning, therapy referrals, I saw something shift in Sarah's demeanor. The slump in her shoulders eased slightly, her chin lifting with the first stirrings of determination. When our session ended and Sarah left, promising to return for our next appointment, I sank back into my chair, emotionally drained but oddly invigorated. This was why I had created Worth Rising. This moment, this connection, this chance to turn pain into purpose, it made every sleepless night and every bitter memory worth it. I was so lost in thought that I almost missed the notification ping from my computer. It was an email from my lawyer, marked urgent. With a sense of trepidation, I opened it, scanning the contents quickly. My breath caught in my throat. Ross's latest business venture had collapsed spectacularly, leaving him drowning in debt. In a desperate bid to avoid jail time, he was offering to come clean about everything, the manipulation, the forged documents, all of it. For a moment, I sat there, stunned. This was what I had wanted, wasn't it? Vindication, justice, the truth, finally coming to light. But as I read through the email again, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness for the brother I had lost. I picked up my phone, my finger hovering over my parents' number. They needed to know about this development, but I hesitated, knowing the pain this news would bring them. How many more blows could our family take? As I debated what to do, my gaze fell on the Worth Rising logo on the wall, a phoenix rising from ashes, its wings spread wide. The symbolism struck me anew. From the ashes of betrayal and loss, something new and powerful had risen. With a sudden clarity, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't change the past or undo the hurt Ross had caused, but I could choose how to move forward. I dialed my parents' number, my resolve strengthening with each ring. Mom? Dad? It's Kendra. I have some news about Ross, but first, I want to talk to you about Worth Rising. I think it's time for you to see what I've been building. As I spoke, outlining my vision for the future and extending an olive branch to my parents, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The road ahead would still be challenging, the wounds still raw. But for the first time in months, I felt truly hopeful about the future, not just for myself, but for my family and for all the women like Sarah who would walk through Worth Rising's doors. The next morning, I arrived at the Worth Rising office earlier than usual, my mind racing with plans and possibilities. The revelations about Ross and the conversation with my parents had sparked a renewed sense of purpose in me. Today felt like the beginning of a new chapter, not just for the organization, but for my personal journey as well. As I unlocked the office door, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from my father. Your mother and I would like to visit Worth Rising next week. Is Tuesday good for you? A smile tugged at my lips as I typed back a quick affirmative response. The thought of sharing this part of my life with my parents filled me with a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. It was a step towards healing, towards rebuilding the trust that had been so badly damaged. I had just settled at my desk, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, when there was a knock at the door. Puzzled, we weren't expecting any clients this early. I went to answer it. The sight that greeted me nearly made me drop my mug. Ross stood there, looking nothing like the confident, smug brother I remembered from that fateful family dinner. His clothes were rumpled, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he seemed to have aged years in the months since I'd last seen him. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the air between us thick with unspoken words and raw emotion. Finally, Ross broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. "Kendra, Can we talk?" Every instinct screamed at me to slam the door in his face, to protect myself from further hurt, but something in his expression, a vulnerability I'd never seen before, made me hesitate. 5 minutes, I said, my voice colder than I'd intended. That's all you get. I stepped aside, allowing him to enter the office. Ross's eyes darted around the space, taking in the motivational posters, the resource library, the Worth Rising logo on the wall. "So this is what you've been up to," he murmured, a note of what sounded like admiration in his voice. "What do you want, Ross?" I asked, cutting to the chase. I didn't have the energy for small talk or false pleasantries. He turned to face me, and I was struck by the raw pain in his eyes. "I came to apologize," he said. "I know it's not enough, that it can never make up for what I did, but I needed you to hear it from me, face to face." I crossed my arms, my defenses rising. "An apology doesn't undo the damage you've caused, Ross. To me, to our parents, to our family." "I know," he said, his shoulders slumping. "Believe me, I know. I've lost everything, Kendra. My business, my reputation, my family's trust. But the worst part is knowing what I did to you. How I betrayed you." "Why?" The question burst from me before I could stop it. "Why did you do it, Ross? Was money really worth destroying our family?" Ross ran a hand through his disheveled hair, looking lost. "I wish I had a good answer for you. I got in over my head, with some bad investments, and then one lie led to another. I told myself I was protecting you, that I could manage the money better. But the truth is, I was just being selfish and greedy." His admission hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of years of deception and hurt. "I saw the email from the lawyer," I said finally, "about you coming clean." Ross nodded, a flicker of something. Shame. Relief? Crossing his face. "It's the least I can do. I'm prepared to face the consequences of my actions, whatever they may be." I studied my brother, trying to reconcile the man standing before me with the charming, confident sibling I'd grown up with. It was like looking at a stranger wearing a familiar face. "What do you want from me, Ross?" I asked, suddenly feeling very tired. "Forgiveness? Absolution?" He shook his head. "No, I don't expect that. I don't deserve it. I wanted you to know that I see what you're doing here." He gestured around the office. "You've taken something terrible and turned it into something amazing. You're helping people, Kendra, and I'm proud of you for that." His words hit me like a physical blow, stirring up a whirlwind of emotions I wasn't prepared to deal with. Pride. From the brother who had betrayed me. It was almost too much to process. "I don't know what to say to that," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Ross took a step towards me, then seemed to think better of it, and stopped. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. And I want to help if you'll let me." I blinked, sure I had misheard. "Help? How?" "I've made a lot of mistakes, Kendra, hurt a lot of people, but I have skills, financial knowledge, business experience. Maybe I could use those to support Worth Rising. Pro bono, of course. It's not much, but it's a start towards making amends." I stood there, stunned into silence. The offer was so unexpected, so at odds with everything that had happened between us, that I didn't know how to respond. I need time to think about this," I finally managed to say. Ross nodded, a sad smile touching his lips. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be here if you're ready." He turned to leave, pausing at the door to look back at me. "For what it's worth, Kendra, I really am sorry. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make things right." With that, he was gone, leaving me alone in the suddenly too quiet office, my mind reeling from the encounter. I sank into my chair, my coffee long forgotten and cold. Ross's visit had thrown me off balance, dredging up feelings I thought I had dealt with. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was tempered now by something else, a mix of pity, confusion, and the faintest glimmer of hope. As I sat there, trying to process what had just happened, my eyes fell on a framed quote on my desk. It was something I had come across during my darkest days after Ross's betrayal, words that had given me strength when I needed it most. "The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep, loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen." Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Reading those words now, in light of Ross's unexpected visit and offer, I felt a shift inside me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was an opening, a crack in the wall I had built around my heart. I reached for my phone, my fingers hovering over the keypad as I debated what to do. Finally, I typed out a message to Ross. "I need time, but I'm willing to talk more about your offer, not for you but for the women we could help." As I hit send, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This wasn't an ending or a new beginning, but a step forward on a long, complex journey of healing and growth. The rest of the day passed in a blur of client meetings and administrative tasks, but my mind kept drifting back to Ross's visit. By the time I locked up the office that evening, I had made a decision. I would talk to my parents about Ross's offer during their visit next week. Whatever came next, we would face it as a family. Broken, healing, but still connected by bonds that ran deeper than betrayal. As I walked to my car, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges and potential pitfalls. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it head-on. Worth. Rising had started as a way to heal my own wounds, but it had become so much more. It was a beacon of hope for women like Sarah, a chance for redemption for people like Ross, and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new stories of struggle and triumph. But tonight, as I drove home under the darkening sky, I allowed myself to feel proud of how far I'd come. From the ashes of betrayal, I had risen, stronger and more determined than ever. And this, I realized, was just the beginning. The day of my parents' visit to Worth Rising arrived with a mix of anticipation and nervousness churning in my stomach. I had spent the weekend agonizing over how to broach the subject of Ross's offer, rehearsing different scenarios in my head. But as I stood in the office, straightening picture frames and adjusting chairs for the 100th time, I realized that no amount of preparation could fully ready me for this conversation. The chime of the door made me jump. I turned to see my parents entering, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. My mother's eyes were immediately drawn to the Worth Rising logo on the wall, while my father's gaze swept the room, taking in every detail. "Kendra," my mother said, her voice soft with emotion. It's wonderful. I felt a lump form in my throat at the pride in her voice. Thanks, Mom. I'm glad you could both come. My father stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. Show us everything, sweetheart. We want to understand what you've built here. For the next hour, I gave them a tour of the office, explaining our programs, introducing them to some of the staff and volunteers. I showed them the financial literacy materials we had developed, the counseling rooms where we helped women reclaim their independence. With each explanation, each story of a life changed, I saw the understanding grow in my parents' eyes. Finally, we settled in my office, cups of coffee in hand. The moment I had been dreading had arrived. There's something else I need to talk to you about, I began, my heart racing. It's about Ross. I saw my parents stiffen, exchanging a quick glance. The mention of Ross's name still had the power to cast a shadow over any conversation. Taking a deep breath, I recounted Ross's visit, his apology, and his offer to help Worth Rising. As I spoke, I watched a range of emotions flicker across my parents' faces: shock, pain, confusion, and something that looked almost like hope. When I finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. My father was the first to break it. "What are you thinking of doing, Kendra?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. I looked down at my hands, gathering my thoughts. "I'm considering it," I said slowly. "Not for Ross's sake, but for the women we could help. His skills could be valuable to the organization." My mother leaned forward, her brow furrowed with concern. "Are you sure that's wise, honey? After everything he's done?" "I know," I said, meeting her gaze. "Believe me, I've thought about little else since he made the offer. But I've also been thinking about forgiveness, about second chances. Isn't that part of what Worth Rising is about? Helping people rebuild their lives after mistakes and betrayals?" My father nodded slowly. "It's a noble thought, Kendra. But this is different. This is personal." I nodded, acknowledging the truth. In his words, "You're right. It is personal, and that's why it's so hard. But maybe that's also why it could be powerful." My mother reached out, taking my hand in hers. "Whatever you decide, we'll support you. We've already made the mistake of not trusting your judgment once. We won't do it again." Her words, so simple yet so profound, brought tears to my eyes. This was the unconditional support I had been missing, the trust that had been broken and was now slowly being rebuilt. "Thank you," I whispered, squeezing her hand. "That means more than you know." We spent the next hour discussing the pros and cons of Ross's offer, exploring every angle. By the time my parents left, we hadn't reached a definitive decision, but I felt lighter, more certain of my path forward. The following week was a whirlwind of activity. Worth Rising was growing faster than I had anticipated, with more women seeking our help every day. Each story of financial abuse and betrayal that crossed my desk reinforced my commitment to our mission, but also served as a painful reminder of my own experiences. It was during a particularly busy afternoon that my assistant popped her head into my office. "Kendra, there's a reporter here to see you. Says she's doing a piece on organizations that help women recover from financial abuse." I glanced at my packed schedule, then nodded. "Give me 5 minutes, then send her in." As I quickly tidied my desk, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. Press coverage could be a huge boost for Worth Rising, bringing attention to our cause and potentially helping more women. But it also meant opening up about my own story, something I still struggled with at times. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Melissa, entered with a warm smile and a firm handshake. "Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Lawson. I've heard great things about Worth Rising." We settled into a comfortable rhythm of questions and answers, discussing the organization's mission, our programs, and the impact we'd had so far. But then came the question I had been both expecting and dreading. "What inspired you to start Worth Rising, Ms. Lawson?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. It grew out of my own experience with financial betrayal, I began, my voice steady despite the emotions roiling inside me. My brother manipulated my parents into signing over my inheritance to him, nearly destroying our family in the process. Melissa's eyes widened slightly, her pen poised over her notepad. That must have been devastating. How did you move past that to create something so positive? A rueful smile tugged at my lips. It wasn't easy. There were days when I didn't think I could get out of bed, let alone start an organization. But I realized that my story wasn't unique. There were women out there facing similar betrayals, often from those closest to them, and they needed help. As I continued to share my story, I found the words flowing more easily. I talked about the pain of discovery, the long legal battles, the slow process of rebuilding trust with my parents. And then, surprising myself, I found myself talking about Ross's recent visit and his offer to help. "So, what are you going to do?" Melissa asked, leaning forward with interest. I paused, realizing that in the act of telling my story, I had finally come to a decision. "I'm going to give him a chance," I said slowly. "Not because he deserves it, but because Worth Rising is about more than just me or my family. If Ross's skills can help other women recover from financial abuse, then I have to at least consider it." Melissa nodded, a look of understanding in her eyes. "That's a remarkably generous perspective given what you've been through." "It's not about generosity," I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "It's about turning pain into purpose. Every woman who walks through our doors is looking for a second chance, a way to reclaim their worth. Who am I to deny that chance to anyone, even someone who hurt me deeply?" As Melissa left, promising to send me a draft of the article before publication, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Talking about my journey, about the complex emotions surrounding Ross's offer, had clarified things in a way that hours of internal debate hadn't. That evening, after the office had emptied and the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across my desk, I picked up my phone and dialed Ross's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice cautious. "Kendra, I've thought about your offer," I said, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "I'm willing to give it a try on a probationary basis. But there will be conditions, and at the first sign of any dishonesty or manipulation, you're out. No second chances." There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then Ross spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Kendra. I promise. I won't let you down, not again." As I hung up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a step towards healing, towards reclaiming the family bonds that had been so badly damaged. The next few months were a period of intense growth and change for Worth Rising. With Ross's financial expertise, we were able to expand our programs, reaching more women and offering more comprehensive support. It wasn't always easy. There were tense moments, times when old resentments threatened to surface. But slowly, steadily, we found a new rhythm. 1 year to the day after that fateful family dinner where I had confronted Ross, I stood at a podium, addressing a room full of supporters, clients, and media at Worth Rising's first annual gala. "A year ago, I thought my world had ended," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. "I had lost my inheritance, my trust in family, and my sense of self-worth. But from that loss, something beautiful was born." I gestured to the room, to the women whose lives we had touched, to my parents sitting in the front row, tears glistening in their eyes, to Ross standing at the back, a look of quiet pride on his face. Worth Rising isn't just about recovering from financial abuse. It's about rediscovering our inherent worth, about rising from the ashes of betrayal stronger than before. It's about second chances and the power of turning pain into purpose. As I continued to speak, sharing stories of the women we had helped and our plans for the future, I felt a surge of gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. The IV, Pain of Ross's betrayal would always be a part of me, a scar on my heart. But it no longer defined me. Instead, it had become the catalyst for something greater, a force for change that reached far beyond my own life. In helping others reclaim their worth, I had found my own. And in the faces of the women in the audience, in the proud smiles of my parents, in the quiet redemption of my brother, I saw the truth of the words that had guided me through my darkest days. The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. As I concluded my speech to thunderous applause, I knew with certainty that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more women to help, more battles to fight. But I was ready for them all, because I had risen, and in rising, I had found my true worth.